My mother-in-law decided that my baby was hers, not mine, and for months I lived with the slow, grinding terror that she would take her. People talk about difficult in-laws like they are an annoyance you can politely sidestep. My life with her was nothing like that. It was invasion, constant, deliberate, and cold as a scalpel, and it changed me into someone who watched the back door like it was the entrance to a war zone. I am telling this because the memory still vibrates beneath my skin. Because someone should know how carefully a monster can dress like family. Before the pregnancy, her dislike was small and steady, like a low hum. She criticized the way I laughed, the photos I posted, the job that gave me fulfillment. She had phrases that were always wrapped in smiles. "Oh, bless you, you try so hard," that meant, in her language, "you will never measure up." My husband minimized it, "That's just mom," and I believed him, because love causes you to make excuses. When we found out we were expecting, I thought her attention might soften. Instead, she sharpened. Her eyes lit in a way that didn't resemble joy so much as calculated anticipation. She began to plan my daughter's life the moment she learned I was pregnant. She bought clothes 2 sizes too small and left them on our porch with a note, "My baby will wear this." She insisted on discussing names as if I were consulting her as an authority, not an equal mother. The first time she called my unborn child my baby in front of me, I laughed it off. It was easier to smile and pretend it was harmless. But her language hardened into possession. She rubbed my belly like a promise, told friends at gatherings that she was going to teach her manners properly, and corrected my diet as though I were simply a caretaker failing her standards. When I told my husband I felt uncomfortable, he tried to soothe me. "She's excited. She doesn't mean anything by it." He hoped for the version of his mother who could be managed by a hug and a gentle word. I hoped too. Hope is cheap, reality is not. When the labor came, it ripped through me and left me raw, more vulnerable than I had ever been. I birthed with every fiber of me ached and rejoiced, and in that twilight between night and a new life, she flooded the hospital room with a presence that erased me. She pushed past well-wishers and clamped her hand on my daughter's tiny body before I could summon the strength to lift her. "My baby," she whispered, "it's so soft," but all the nurses heard it. She turned to me and said, without condolence, "You did well." Not congratulations, but whatever she said was an ownership claim. I remember clutching at air, feeling filaments of myself snap as if someone snipped them and handed my child a tag with a name I had not written. At home, the dynamic ossified into ritualized undermining. She had a spare key, an old kindness, a trust extended years before that we could not foresee she would weaponize, and she used it with the casualness of someone who had already decided the house belonged to her, too. I would open the nursery door and find her there often, smiling into my daughter's face, whispering lullabies I had never taught her, smoothing hair I had just washed, rearranging toys, altering sleep schedules as if my daughter's routine were a symphony she had the right to conduct. "Grandma knows what the baby needs," she'd tell my husband, and he would smile, soothing a man whose childhood had been braided to hers in ways that made him blind. When I asserted boundaries, "Please call ahead, please ask before bringing a gift," she played the offended martyr. "I'm only trying to help," she'd say, and my anger, which had jagged edges and sharp words, would be turned into evidence of my instability. Her strategy was simple but effective: make me look unreasonable while she styled herself the saint. The attacks were not grand at first, small, venomous, perfectly pointed. She would comment on the way my daughter reacted when I held her, the pitch of her cry, the smell of her skin, the pillows I chose to place in the crib. She purchased formula in secret and left it under the sink like a time bomb of guilt. When I insisted on breastfeeding, she called it selfish in a tone that was meant to wound more than advise. She would take the baby mid-cry and announce, with theatrical tenderness, "See? She calms for Grandma. She knows who really loves her." The phrase was a brick tossed through the window of my self-worth. I swallowed the brick, one more time, because the alternative was the break of family. I did not yet know how fragile that would prove to be. The first time I caught her packing a diaper bag, it didn't look like theft. It looked like a grandparent preparing for a day trip. But the way she had folded the little clothes, meticulous, like laying down a claim, and the steady look in her eyes when she met mine told a different story. "I'll take her for a drive," she said. "A little fresh air will do you both good." For a moment I considered trusting her. For a moment I wanted, desperately, to be the mother who could rest and trust that a family would be there. But I had learned to read the way she labeled things. Her help was a thin mask covering a plan. That morning, I grabbed the car seat out of her hands as if snatching a stolen heirloom. She did not argue fiercely, she simply looked at me with pity, as if I were a child acting out. "You're being hysterical," she told me later to anyone who would listen. Once, when she had been especially tenacious, I called my sister for advice. "You have to stand firm," she told me, and I nodded across the line, feeling cheap courage return. But standing firm at home was different from having the words to stand firm in my own head. Every time I raised a voice, my husband diffused me, not because he wanted my mother to win, but because he wanted to keep the peace. He tended to assume that conflict would ebb if not amplified. That belief made him passive in the face of active predation. Between his guilt at confronting his mother and his fear of rocking his fragile familial boat, he drifted away from me in the smallest increments. Each concession he made was a nail in the little box holding our trust. The escalation was deliberate and predictable, like a schedule she followed to sharpen effect. She began to leave voicemails that read like manifestos. The baby belonged with family, the mother was not fit, the father had a duty to his bloodline. At night she would park by our house and wait, engine off, as if listening to the house breathe. Neighbors would send texts, "Have you seen your mother-in-law?" And my hands would go cold as ice. Once, a neighbor told me she'd watched my mother-in-law stand by our living room window and press her forehead to the glass as if trying to see inside my daughter's skull. I started checking the locks twice instead of once. I practiced sleep like a spy practicing breathing. The night she climbed the back wall still haunts me. It was a late autumn evening, wind keening through the trees in a way that made the house seem hollow. I woke at a sound like someone walking in socks, unnatural in that it was not the house settling but a measured footfall. From the darkness of the bedroom, I bolted, every nerve raw, and when I opened the nursery door the crib was empty. My throat constricted with that specific panic that narrows time to a tunnel, flat, white, and endless. Then I saw her, in the corner, cradling my daughter. The scene looked like something out of a nightmare, my child small and curled, a woman with my husband's features reflected in her face, rocking slowly. She turned her head and smiled at me, slow and pleased, as if she had won a game no one else knew they had been playing. "Shoo," she said, and the word was a benediction and a threat. My husband lunged into the room, terrifying in his raw, protecting instinct, and he grabbed our daughter from her arms. The mother-in-law's voice changed then, thick and bitter, and she pushed back, not violent, but furious. We called the police in a drunk blur of adrenaline and disbelief. He asked me not to press charges. He begged, in a voice that cracked with conflicting loyalties. He couldn't reconcile his love for me and the woman who had raised him. She sat in the same chair in the same house of his memory. He feared that arresting her would cause his father to collapse. He feared his own future as a son would be tarnished by usurping his mother's role. He asked for leniency, for understanding, and I felt a fissure open beneath my feet. I said I would not press charges. I remember the cold rationality of my decisions. This would make things public, worse, but it would also give her a reason, an excuse, to blame. He wanted private peace. I wanted the baby safe. Because we did not press charges that night, the mother-in-law returned to her theater of subtle torments with renewed vigor. She told friends I was dramatic. She told relatives I was unstable. She fed the narrative of my unfitness like a gardener tending a poisonous plant. I started to keep records. I learned that a frightened mother learns to document with the clarity of obsession. I recorded calls. I saved messages, took pictures of her car at odd hours, wrote down conversations. The file grew fat and heavy in a drawer, a secret armor I clutched to my chest at night like a Bible. She tried to gaslight again at the pediatrician's office. She walked in, the practiced smile folded neatly, and demanded to see my daughter's records. The receptionist, an angel I would owe for life, saw through the charm and called me. That exchange was the hinge on which everything swung. She had a history of trying to use kindness as a key. Now she wanted to convert that key into a masterpass. The office incident was my breaking point. I could no longer rely on my husband's half measures. I realized, in a flood of bitter clarity, that if I wanted my child to be safe, I would be the one to call in authorities. I called social services. The words sat like stones in my throat as I recited things I had never thought I would say about my in-law: trespassing, attempted abduction, harassment, impersonation. The social worker listened, professional and patient, and told me an investigation would begin. It was the most brutal, intimate thing I have ever endured in a public way. Social workers interviewed me for hours, going through voicemails, dates, times, emotional states. They questioned my husband and neighbors. They even spoke with our pediatrician. At first I felt exposed, like a body stripped and inspected. But each detail I produced felt like another nail driven toward the coffin of her lies. My mother-in-law constructed a defense the way a stage actor builds a costume: tearful testimonies, accusations of my postpartum instability, insinuations that I was alienating her son. She called me paranoid in public, hysterical in private, and she used people's sympathy like currency. But the documentary evidence was stubborn. There were videos of her in the street at 2 in the morning, VoIP records showing calls at times she had lied about, a neighbor who had photographed her car parked outside our house on multiple days. Her narrative unraveled like cheap fabric. Social services convened, interviews repeated, and slowly the machinery of intervention took the shape of legal protection. They served her a protective order in mid-afternoon, the sun unhelpful in washing away the ugliness of it. She had been waiting, or so she claimed, in a way that suggested premeditation. When officers approached, she lost the practiced calm she had maintained in crowds. She screamed, a raw animal sound that echoed off our small street, "You can't do this. She's mine." Her body was all angles in desperation, and for a horrifying second it looked as if she might lunge, toward the baby, toward anyone who stood between her and what she believed she owned. Neighbors peered from porches, a few filmed the scene. One woman I barely knew came up and told me quietly that she had always thought my mother-in-law had been odd. Sympathy, finally, real and unmediated, touched me with grass-sweet relief. After the protective order, the house healed in taut, cautious ways. Locks were changed again, private security advice was taken, and phone numbers of friends were kept at the bedside in case of a panic. My husband and I attended counseling together. He finally admitted that he had been in denial, that his love for his mother had been like a blindfold over his eyes. He said the words that were hard to hear, how hurt he was, how betrayed, because the woman who raised him had not only eroded our trust, she had attacked our family's future. Choosing us meant severing a cord tied to his past, and it cost him a grief that landed in his voice like a rock. She was barred from unsupervised contact. She was required to attend assessments. Social services recommended therapy and supervised visits only in a controlled environment, and that was a concession both generous and limiting. She attempted a sheepish apology in the weeks that followed, each phrase dripping with performative remorse. She called and left messages that alternated between pleading and rage. We let some messages be and saved others. The law had given us a scaffold, but the work of healing ourselves and ensuring our child's safety fell to us. There are aftershocks I did not expect. Sometimes, in the quiet hours, I wake and the house feels too large, the shadows too many. I will, without thinking, Check the nursery to ensure my daughter is breathing. I hover by the window when the street flushes with late-night cars. My husband flinches at doorbells. The trauma is not a single event, it is a weather pattern that has settled over us. But with each day that passes without an incident, the pattern thins. My daughter grows. She toddles and laughs and stamps crumbs across the rug, and I find, in these tiny moments, that I have reclaimed what I feared lost. He lost his mother in a way that is negligible to some and devastating to him. She lost her access to a granddaughter who might never remember the woman who once held her as if she belonged to her alone. She lost the right to enter a house and to say my baby without consequence. She lost, in the end, the story she had tried to write where her son and grandchildren fit neatly within her control. I gained a reputation among certain relatives as difficult, and for a time that stung in ways I had not imagined. But the weight of protecting my child outweighed the sting of gossip. I learned to be ruthless in paper and polite in public. I learned to document the small cruelties before they escalated. I learned that love sometimes demands a ledger. Most of all, I learned about the extraordinary edge that runs between love and possession. My mother-in-law believed that blood gave her rights. I learned that blood does not grant the right to override another person's motherhood, to erase a woman from the narrative of her child's life. That truth kept me steady when my hands wanted to shake. It is the truth I held on to in courtrooms of the heart, in the dry professionalism of social workers, and in quiet conversations with a husband who had finally chosen us. The nights are fewer when I wake in panic. The file in the drawer is still there, heavy and honest. Sometimes my daughter pulls it out and smiles at the stapled papers, unaware that the paper once saved her. When she asks about the woman on the news who once shouted in the street, we will tell her the truth, that some people cannot love without trying to own, and that love does not need to claim. We will teach her boundaries, consent, and the brave art of insisting on being seen. My mother-in-law is not the only antagonist in stories like this, but she is mine, and she is real. She tried to replace me. She tried to rewrite my name in my daughter's life. She failed. The cost was high, the repair will take years. But I hold my child in the middle of the night and watch her small breath even and steady, and I know the sharp, simple thing at the center of it, she is mine, and I will fight for that with the small, stubborn ferocity I learned from being almost robbed of it.